What's up, guys? Welcome back to the library and welcome back to the Professor Bourbon podcast. We've had another little hiatus, but it's great to be back talking about the Lord's brown water. So how are you doing tonight, Professor Bourbon?
Doing great. Just back from a trip from the Annex, helping you guys get your project started. That's a big part of why we're intermittent here. Big things coming down in Sonoy, Georgia, to the little historic town of Sonoy. I don't know if you guys want to share at all what's going on down there, but we're all pretty excited about it.
Yeah, I'll go over it real quickly. So myself and my wife, aka the class, are opening up a bridal shop here in our little town in Sonoy, Georgia. And so we just received our keys pretty recently. And so we've been moving everything in, getting wallpaper, furniture, dresses into the shop. So it's been a little difficult to hammer out some time that we could do a podcast. Professor Bourbon was in town, and our nephew was with him, Professor Bourbon's grandson. And unfortunately, he got sick while he was here. And so a lot of the nights we were taking care of him and trying to make him feel better. So we weren't able to record the podcast we were hoping to. But we are back tonight. We're back talking about bourbon. I'm drinking a little Georgia juice. Speaking of Georgia, I got a little ASW toasted rye in my glass. It was a sample that Scott from Georgia World of Beverage in Fairburn gave me. So shout out to Scott. Really tasty rye. Haven't had this one before, so decided to pour it tonight. What you sipping on over there, Professor Bourbon?
Well, as always, a trip to the Annex requires me to drive back to the library because I got to bring stuff in, beef up the shocks, and so the revenuers don't catch me coming across state lines. And one of the bottles that I picked up there is this. We'll talk about a couple of the others in a minute. This Yellowstone hand-picked, store pick from the Tap House. Shout out to Pre. It was barreled on 2619. It's 119 proof. We haven't opened it yet here, so instead of like we do on the TikTok thing and open it up there, we're gonna give it an open here. Maybe we'll get a pop out of it. And as always, and to Freddie Johnson, we're gonna leave the cap off here and have a sip on this, and we'll see how it goes. This is a neck pour of it, 119 proof. We'll let you know how it goes, and we'll talk about some of the other things we picked up right off the rip. It's a pretty nice nose. Some vanilla, caramel, light brown sugar, a little bit of
oak.
I
actually have one of those here at the house that's from Tap House as well. So I might have to pour that after I have this ASW toasted rye. I think I have the same one. It's 119 proof from, oh no, excuse me. Mine's going to be from Georgia World of Beverage from Scott again. So I might have to take a little pour of that and see how it compares to the one that you have. As you said, you just returned from the Annex here in Georgia. So I was seeing if you wanted to talk about any of the bottles you found while you're down here.
Oh, just got some cinnamon on the nose right there, too. So we'll leave that sit for a minute. Yeah, it turned out to be a pretty good trip. We'll start out with a little bit more of the kind of the run-of-the-mill stuff, I guess, if you will, because we have an exciting bottle that I really want to talk about and am excited to have gotten. We have sorry about that. I didn't know if that was the class texting me or not. Because sometimes she gets mad at me while we're doing this and can't. I got everything going, so you can edit this out or leave it in as the bumbling, doddering old fool if you want. You guys do whatever you want with me. But we got a bottle over here. I got a Nashville Barrel Company bottle that I'm looking forward to, a Georgia one we got picked up. We also got the two new B524s, the Larceny and the Elijah Craig, which we both tried while we were down there. They were pretty good. We got a bottle from Midwestern Distillery. Why can't in Columbus? I've lost the name of it. We bought one of those bottles that was pretty good. I'm trying to remember the name. It was named after their father. They talked a little bit on the distillery, and the name is escaping me now. The class is losing her mind because I will come back to that. We stopped in there at Crooks in Sonoy and bought that, and we bought something else that's jumping out of my mind right now. And then while we were driving around picking up stuff and getting ready to put stuff in the bridal shop, the scout got on the bat phone, so to speak, got a little alert that at one of the stores that he likes to hunt at, there was a 1792 12-year-old. And I have to admit, and this is the beauty about being a professor, I don't know everything, is I have to admit I had not, if I was aware of this, I didn't remember. We got us a 1792 12-year-old. And we haven't opened up that one yet, so I'm looking forward to opening that one. And then the coup de grace, the big dog, the big thing that I'm really excited about, and we owe the Scout to this one, is and I don't know if this one probably won't get open till Christmas time when the Scout is up here, but the Scout managed to find us the Old Fitz decanter 20 bottled in bond 8-year. This is the 2023 expression, so we're pretty excited about that, and it looks beautiful up in the library on the shelf up there on the top, in between some of the other nicer bottles. We also did happen to pick up, as I forgot too, not that this wasn't there, but we finally got our Willett Estate 10-year-old, got shipped in from Professor Proof, and we did open that while we were in the annex, and enjoyed that one a lot. I think we both agreed that it was a B or B plus. I think I liked it a little bit better than you did. A relatively high proof, and really enjoyed that one. So those are the things we got while we were down there, and still got lots of bottles to open, and we're going to keep opening them and giving you our grades and see how they go. So look for us on the TikTok, and I know I don't say subscribe, follow, because that makes the class mad when I say subscribe, so I do it anyway. So again, as always, even on this, like, follow, subscribe, all those sorts of things help us get in the algorithm. And don't forget the TikTok and the Instagram as well. So that's what we got. That's where we are. And
yeah, it's that Old Fitz was something I've been looking for a while, because you did help us a lot getting the bridal shop open. You've been willing to help us any way you could. You came all the way down here to help us get things set up. So I was happy to give you that bottle Old Fitz 8 as a little thank you. Another thing, I reached out to one of the store owners here and let him know that I was planning on doing a little opening at the store to have something nice. So I have to give a quick shout out to Pre at Tap House. Again, Pre. He hooked me up with a little EHT single barrel, which I did not have yet. I've had several before. I've had a couple store picks, and then I've had one of the normal standard single barrel, and he hooked this up. So we were able to pour that inside the store, which was really cool. So huge shout out to Pre. That's a really great pour. And then I know when you were in town, we also tried to hop onto that Russell's Reserve 15. And I'm sure if anyone's listening to this that has any bourbon prowess, they may have seen what happened with that. Everybody that tried to get on, we shut down the whole website 2 separate days. So I'd be interested to hear what Professor Bourbon has to say about Wild Turkey trying to do that release online and kind of the way that everything went.
It was a disappointment. You told me we heard about the first one being a mess, and at least and we later heard the Scout did, because he's always got his ear to the ground, so to speak, like a good Scout. And we heard that, oh no, they're going to release it again. They apologized to everybody. We're going to be all right. We sat in the parking lot of the Publix, so we had the right amount of internet while we picked up some stuff for the bridal shop, and we were hitting the button and got the old 404 error. There's no website here. Go away, come back. You can't have anything. And apparently we weren't the only ones, and tells you if you're going to announce something on the website, you're going to give yourself a denial of service spurge, and nobody's going to be able to get in. And that's kind of what happened. So we're keeping our fingers crossed. We got some feelers out, and everybody that's had the Russell's 15 is putting it up as maybe the bourbon of the year. So you talk about FOMO. I got some FOMO, though. I got this Old Fitz, so and the Willett. So I color me a little FOMO, but on the other hand, bourbon, pouring over in bourbon as we approach 500 bottles in the library to complain that I couldn't get a Russell's 15 when I came home from Atlanta with a Willett Family Estate 10 and an Old Fitz bottled in bond in the decanter. I think there's probably a lot of people that would be willing to have those 2 bottles and not have one of the Russells. So I try to remain a little less irritated by it, but every once
Yeah,
in
I
a
don't know if
while.
you saw any of the videos that showed the Russell's 15 next to other bourbons, but it's got that really, really dark color like
Yeah.
the 13th Colony Double Oaked had. And usually that's a pretty good sign of the juice that's inside. Not always, but I know between the two of us, we've definitely seen some of those that are really dark that are fantastic bourbons. But yeah, it's really interesting that they decided to do a release like that online. I'm kind of interested to hear your thought on that being an allocated process, because it's almost the luck of the draw on, can I be on at the right time? Can I get it into my cart, and can I complete checkout to those available bottles, compared to it's kind of the same crap luck for maybe my store got one and I'm going to show up at the right time and be able to purchase it before someone else does. So it kind of balances the scale almost in a way if the website hadn't completely crashed. Am I correct?
Yeah, I mean, there's all allocational mechanisms. We said before we had the lesson, and I think you got tired of hearing me say it for 2 weeks. Is with all the nonsense you guys were dealing with, and wallpaper nonsense, and furniture coming in from China, and all that sort of stuff, is all cost or transactions cost. So no matter how they allocate the bourbon, if they allocated it $1,000 a bottle and you can wander in off the street and buy it, $1,000. If they allocate it online and you have to sit there for 10 hours push and go to get to it, I mean, is your time worth $100 an hour? You're at $1,000, So all costs are transactions cost, and all allocation mechanisms, no matter what they are, benefit some and hurt others, and so no matter how you allocate a product, since life is full of trade-offs, some people are going to be able to get it, some people aren't, right? That's the nature of scarcity, and if there was enough for everybody, it would be free, right? The price would be zero. So there's not enough for everybody, so the price is above zero. So you try to keep that in mind as you work your way through this stuff. So yeah, it'd have been great to hit that button and find out, I got a Russell's 15 coming in the mail. That's not the way it works, but I'm sure you'll run into one at some point somewhere. I know you've been greasing the skids at the 3 stores that we kind of work around down there, but we'll see what happens.
I've talked to some people. I've put some feelers out. I've thrown some bait out there. So I'm trying to get a line in and see if I can't find someone that has one. It does have that much higher MSRP. I think MSRP is about $250 on that bottle, which scares a lot of people away initially. But unfortunately, this release has had nothing but people jumping through the roof about it. So that secondary price is already up there, beyond $500. But one of those that I've heard is just a phenomenal pour. So hopefully I'm able to kind of locate one of those bottles for you and we can try it together. I know we'd like to talk about some of the stuff that you've been reading when you were down here. I know I caught you a few times reading Proof whenever we had a few minutes. So just curious to see what the status is on Proof, and also see if there's anything else interesting you may have seen or read in the bourbon world this week.
Well, we as you said, we were gonna, and I was gonna say on one last note on the Russell's 15, all the guys that whose taste that I kind of respect and go along with, it's bourbon night. They were lucky enough to have a little bit of Russell's 15. They were gushing over it. I know the Basement Bourbon Lounge and Trent and his father, they might have called it whiskey of the year, and I know the bourbon junkies were all over it too, and I usually agree pretty closely with their taste profiles, and I'm really looking forward to it. But yeah, always. I think we mentioned this book before, Proof, which is written by. I want to make sure I get the author's name in here, by Adam Rogers, who is an author, a best-selling author, and does stuff in kind of science journalism, some other things, and so I read the introduction in the first chapter in the book, and have really enjoyed it. The first chapter is on yeast and how we discovered that yeast was what turned sugar into alcohol, and the stuff that went around it. I was going to look at a couple of things I thought were really cool because they tie in with economics and science in general. In the introduction, I think this is really interesting and because the proof, it's called The Science of Booze. And one of my favorite lines in here is he says, people sometimes think science is about discovery, but the action in science, the fun part of doing it or reading about it, isn't answers, it's questions. So we never learn anything by having answers. We learn things by asking questions. And so when alcohol first started getting done, we're trying to figure out how is it that alcohol formed under these circumstances and why. And they one of the reasons they call it spirits or distilling creates spirits they thought it was like a spirit. There was something out there that was coming into that interacted in a way that they didn't understand. And so the distillation process created that. And it was a long time before they discovered yeast. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But there's a great quote from William Faulkner I just learned, who's a good Southern author. He said that civilization begins with distillation. And then, and to that end, Adam Rogers says, booze is civilization in a glass, right? Booze is civilization in a glass. I think that's a great and a really interesting, because of the friendships it causes and the people to be around each other. And he also says in here that from the perspective of his wallet, the booze industry has him exactly where it wants me. And I feel sometimes the same way, right? So one other line before we go on to the yeast thing I thought was really cool is you're supposed to ask questions. And he says the only people that can get away with constantly asking questions and going down rabbit holes are journalists, scientists, and 3-year-olds. And 3-year-olds aren't allowed in bars. I thought that was a pretty funny line on that. But yeast is interesting because without yeast, we don't get alcohol, because essentially what yeast or alcohol is yeast farts, right? Yeast eat sugar, some sort of sugar, and the byproduct of the yeast eating sugar is alcohol, and we capture that alcohol. And so in when we make the alcohol, we give the yeast something to eat, and the byproduct from the yeast getting something to eat is alcohol. And then you can take from that, you can make it beer, or you can take in and distill it and make spirits. But the interesting thing about yeast, I didn't know this, was the people called the sediment that was left over after the yeast did their stuff, the yeast, because of its action. The French and German names for yeast, Hefe, and the English yeast comes from the Dutch gist, which gives us the idea of I get the gist of things. So yeast and gist have the same etymology, which I thought was kind of interesting. And so it wasn't until Lavoisier, a nice French scientist, that we knew that it was the yeast doing through a bunch of experiments and a bunch of questions, that we knew what it was, that it was the yeast doing the heavy lifting, so to speak, and turning the sugar into alcohol. In fact, as they eat the sugar, they need nitrogen to survive, and they excrete ethanol, so yeast farts basically. And the Germans, a guy named Schwann, called them Zuckerpilz. So what he thought they were Zuckerpilz before we knew they were German. So Zuckerpilz, and you might recognize words like Zucker and sugar, and they all sound kind of the same. And it was because they're all related to that sort of thing. So it's kind of an interesting so far trip into the idea of how we get to alcohol, and the next chapter that will come up, and I hope I'll give a little better summary of than just banging around on this, is the sugar. What kind of sugar do they need, and the yeast, and then we'll talk about distillation and some of the other stuff. So again, asking questions is where the action is, and that's the way we learn stuff, is to ask questions, not to give ourselves answers. So that's always fun.
With that note, the smell, is that the smell that we smell whenever we go into distilleries, that they call it distiller's beer? Is that what we're smelling when we go in there? That extremely distinct smell that you pick up, is that coming from the yeast?
It's kind of, because think about when you walk into a distillery, you're doing the same basic thing as you do to make bread. I've heard Germans, when I was in Germany, the Germans call bread or beer liquid bread. And so you start with the same process, right? Because you need yeast that creates the air that creates the bread so it's not unleavened, so it puffs up. and then you cook it, and it's all the yeast and the grain and the smell to give that nice. That's a smell that you can't describe really. I don't know that it smells like anything else. I remember, the last time I was at Maker's Mark walking through the grounds, and you could just smell it. Maker's Mark is weird as a distillery because you smell that everywhere when you're at Maker's Mark. You don't really get that. You smell it a little bit when you walk into other places, but not like you do at Maker's Mark. And so yeah, that's why it smells like bread. That's why it smells like a bakery, because it's all the same, basically the beginning of the same process.
I feel like that makes sense because we've been walking around places before, especially in cities, when we were in Italy and places like that, where you catch that whiff walking by a window, and it takes you right back to being on like the Bourbon Trail and walking into those distilleries, and it's such a distinct smell that it almost is like for me, like being a dog and smelling like when your owner's cooking like steak or something, and automatically your ears perk up. It's like I'm walking around and I smell that distillate beer smell that a lot of people probably wouldn't think is that appealing of a smell if you were just to take it randomly. But because of what it kind of triggers in my brain and being at the Bourbon Trail and knowing that it has, usually I'm like Pavlov's dog. I know that after I smell that, someone's going to give me a taste of bourbon coming down the road. So I automatically get excited. But yeah, that's one of those smells, like you said, you can't really describe, but you know it as soon as you smell it.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And then when you add that, walk into a rick house and you get that smell of the sugars mixing with the oak and the old in there, and you walk in, there's nothing like the smell, that sweet vanilla caramely smell of walking into an old rick house, and just it's incredible. If you've never been on a tour, and I think we've said this before, you owe it to yourself to go on a tour. They're way worth it, even little tours at little places, and talk about the process and what makes the process interesting, because pretty much all alcohol starts out the same way, regardless of whether it's beer, cider, whiskey, cognac, liqueur, whatever it is. You feed yeast some sugar, and depends on the source of the sugar, right? You feed yeast some sugar. Depending on the source of the sugar, you get different alcohol profiles and different things. And then if you don't distill it, you get beer. If you distill it, you get spirits. And I can remember, and if you don't distill it, maybe you leave that bottle of cider in the after you go apple hunting and you go to the apple orchard and you leave that bottle of cider in your cellar and you forget about it. Open up next spring and you go, whoa, that's kind of hard. Well, something happened and somehow some yeast got in there and ate up the sugar in the apple cider and turned it into hard cider. I remember the first time I tried that when I was a kid. I was like, what the hell is going on here? Yeah, we had a bottle of cider in there. So it's all the same process, which is really kind of interesting. It all starts the same. It doesn't matter what kind of alcohol it is, it starts the same.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback off something you said too. You said, go out there and even check out some of the smaller distilleries and things like that. You don't have to be on the Bourbon Trail to find a good distillery or to find a place to kind of educate yourself about bourbon. I didn't realize until I started looking how many distilleries were around me, small and even, small to large. And all of them usually will do some kind of tour. And a lot of times those small, like niche craft distilleries, those guys are so passionate about bourbon that it's really cool to go in there and get in their environment where it's kind of small scale. They don't have all this red tape they have to go through. They can walk you right through the distillery and really show you the passion about it. So like you said, I would highly recommend, you don't have to wait to be on the Bourbon Trail to go to Buffalo Trace or Maker's Mark or things like that. You can go to a place here in Atlanta like ASW. We have Legends up and coming. I've heard 13th Colony is basically in like a little warehouse in like an industrial section of town in Americus, Georgia, in the middle of nowhere. But everyone says when you go in there, everyone has such like a passion for their product and they're so proud of everything they do. So like you said, I would highly encourage people to go out, try to find a local distillery. And even if they don't have a tour, just go in there and start talking to the guy about bourbon. And they're more than likely going to talk as much as you'd like to talk. And they'll probably educate you as well in the process.
Yeah, the little small distilleries are fun. We have one here in Prince Edward County, Virginia, called Sandy River Distillery that they just got a brand new Vendome Vendome still, they had the tragedy of having an old pot still blow up on them, and the owner got pretty badly burned. Thankfully, he's recovered from it, and they were sourcing some juice early and storing it in Virginia. And their bourbon is called the 1840, named after the date of the building that they have there on their campus, a little tiny distillery. And you go over there and they have, the distilleries that do that are fun because they're typically they're that kind of the same vibe that you used to get when the craft beer stuff started, where everybody's kind of there in a big communal atmosphere. Civilization starts with distillation, right? Everybody's there enjoying themselves. There's usually, if there's not a little food truck, that's a surprising thing, but there's lots of people sitting around, drinking bourbon. As we said, I've shouted out Ragged Branch before. We went up there and you sit out on the porch looking out, and they sell their own beef there. The steaks are incredible. We just had some hot dogs last night, some all beef frankfurters that were absolutely amazing from that place. And if there's a little distillery around you, even if they're not doing bourbon, go over there and listen and sit and enjoy their product, if nothing else for the knowledge and the passion that those people have. If a guy's making a little distillery, it's a passion project, right? And it's a time-consuming passion project. And find your local distillery and go out and see it. And most states now kind of have bourbon trails. I know Virginia has a whiskey trail, and I think other states are doing the same thing. And there's a lot of good distilleries. Mrs. Professor Bourbon was in Michigan and went into a distillery. I forget which one. We got a couple of bottles from her she was in, oh man, Angie's going to kill me. The class is going to kill me because I can't remember. Traverse City. And she walked in. They were supposed to open at noon, and she walked in there at noon, and they were closed. And the lady from the back said, "Hey, why are you here?" She said, "Well, you said you open at noon or 11 or whatever time." She got there. They said, "No, we don't open for another hour. Do you want to buy something?" And she looked and said, "I don't know." And then she told the story of Professor Bourbon and showed the pictures of the library. And the lady let her in and said, went to the back room and said, "Well, how about these?" And brought out stuff from the back room. And I got some single barrels that were in the back room that the owner didn't even know about, by the way. The owner came out later and looked at her and go, "What are you doing?" She goes, "Well, this lady said this, and I gave her these bottles." And so we got some single barrel bottles out of Traverse City that were really good. And the people, if you go there and you talk to them and you show some interest, people love to talk about what they do. People always think you're a good conversationalist if you ask people about themselves and let them talk. And I'm not real good at letting other people talk, but I do the best I can.
Well, speaking of small distillates and things like that, a little teaser maybe for the future. I just found out that one of my good buddies that is actually a beer brewer, he's one of the head brewers for a beer company in Atlanta called Line Creek Brewing. It's actually one of the bigger breweries here on the south side, and they were just approved at one of their locations to start distilling spirits. And so I texted him. I was actually texting him before the podcast tonight, asking what that would look like coming in the future. And he said that they're working on it and that they may be reaching out to MGP to do some stuff with them. They're definitely going to be doing some stuff with the bourbon barrels for the aging process of their beer and stuff like that. So I'm hoping if we can, I can kind of mix into that and at least, help out in any way I can, even if I'm just shoveling stuff at the end of the night, just to be able to see that process from the background, or the behind the scenes is the word I was looking for. Would be kind of cool. But speaking of beer and bourbon, I know there's something really cool coming up where you're at that I'm super jealous of. So I'll let you talk a little bit more about what you have going on this weekend that involves, I don't know, maybe beer and bourbon and barbecue and just everything that's good in life that starts with a B. So I'll let you talk about it. Professor Bourbon, something else with a B. So take it away.
Yeah, we're this weekend. My colleague and I are. My colleague, who's part of the scooter gang, and the reason we call him part of the scooter gang is he managed to crash on a scooter into a curb and fall over on a Lime scooter while we were in Louisville a couple years ago. And
He had had a few drinks. I'll give him that. We were on the Bourbon Trail, so
yeah, that's your story. I don't remember him having anything. I remember it being like 11 o'clock in the morning, but okay, you tell the story your way. But we've, by the way, we've let him live it low before. We haven't, when he crashed, he was wearing his favorite shirt and he ripped his shirt, and we don't tease him about it all anymore. We've completely let it go, and we don't mention it anytime he rents a scooter that he did. And I think we told the story. I don't know if we told the story about the special spoon he got when we were at I think it was Town Branch in Lexington, and the guy there was making us a cocktail. I wish I could remember what it was called. It was really, really good. And he was describing this cocktail where you started out with this kind of coffee liqueur with some bourbon, and then you got some cream and you mixed the cream. It was really good. But anyway, what he did was he took a spoon and he said, okay, now what you have to do is you pour the cream over the spoon. He goes, you can get the cream anywhere you want. You get it at Walmart. It's just half and half, heavy cream. It doesn't really matter where you get it. You can get some at Walmart. It's not special, but you got to get the liquor here. And I wish I could remember it because I kind of got memory jogged and I hadn't thought about it. And he said, well, and then what you got to do is you got to take one of these inverted spoons. And he said, and then you pour the cream over the inverted. He goes, now the inverted spoon, you can get one of these at Walmart. I know he said, I'm sorry. He says, you can get one of these at Amazon. You can call up, get one of these inverted spoons at Amazon. And so understand that I feel my colleague there, Mr. Scooter, kind of his body just after about 2 seconds in, just kind of go, oh. And I go, you really thought that was an inverted spoon, didn't you? And he just put his head down because obviously the joke was the guy took a spoon, turned it over and called it an inverted spoon, said he could buy it at Walmart. So this is the guy that crashed his scooter and wrecked his best shirt. And I'm taking him this weekend. He and I are going up to the 14th annual Beer, Bourbon, and Barbecue Festival in Richmond, Virginia. And apparently there's going to be
turns to take a right to get to that story right there. That was three left turns to take a right.
Exactly. I'm like UPS. There was 3 right turns to make a left. We're not going left. Yeah. We're never making a left.
You're right.
We're never making a left. So apparently there's one of these also, by the way, going on down in Raleigh, just south of Raleigh in I'll think of the town in a second. It's right next to Raleigh. There's one of these going down in North Carolina in, I think, September or October. But here's the way they describe this, and I think this will be fun. Is this is the 14th annual affair, offers up all those pleasures that true Southerners live by. You can tell by my accent that I'm a true Southerner. Beer, bourbon, barbecue, boots, bacon, biscuits, bluegrass, and smoked beasts.
Hallelujah.
It's a great day of beer sipping, bourbon tasting, music listening, cigar smoking, and barbecue eating. And so we're headed up there. We're gonna get a souvenir glass. We got the VIP, so we're gonna have some pig eating. We're gonna have some bourbon tasting. We're gonna get to have a seminar with master distillers and some of the. I looked at the list of bourbon there, and some of the bourbon that's going to be there, if I can find this list here really quick, is absolutely amazing. Almost everybody that distills in Virginia is going to be there, from Bowman to now I've lost the filibuster to Sandy River to Bare Knuckle to there's a whole bunch of people that are going to be there, and really looking forward to that. And it looks like there's more bourbon than I can drink and possibly sip in a day, but I'm gonna give it a shot. There's a lot. Don't make that face at me. There's and national people there are going to be there. Jim Beam, Wild Turkey, Bullet, all sorts of people, and I'm really looking forward to going there this week. We'll take some video. Maybe we'll interview some people, talk to some people. If I this boomer, he's a millennial that I'm taking along with me, so at least I got somebody that knows how to video, and so the class can stop laughing at me. and we'll figure out and go from there. There's going to be wine, seltzer, barbecue, all sorts of mess going to be there. I'm looking forward to that, and it should be fun. It's going to be a beautiful day here in Richmond, Virginia, in the mid 80s, sunny, cool, dry, and that'll give us something to do for the weekend. So we'll have a report on that next week.
All right, so it sounds like Professor Bourbon's flying me up to Richmond this weekend. That's all I just heard. Beautiful weather, bourbon, barbecue. I have no reason to be here in Atlanta, so that sounds like I'm coming up to Richmond. I just gotta look. I just gotta look from the class like she was gonna murder me.
Except, let's see. Build the desk for the bridal shop. Build the platforms for the brides in their private suites, so they can have their private suites. Get the bourbon glasses ready, the prosecco glasses ready. Get the charcuterie boards put together. Yeah, you got nothing else to do. Put together furniture.
Start from the top again. Let me start making notes. Can you just start from the top, because I don't hear this all the time. So just go ahead.
Yeah,
hit me again with that.
Well, I'll make a trip back to the annex in about 10 days. So we're really looking forward to that. So I know this was kind of a haphazard, kind of crazy one. We did, by the way, unfortunately, we talked about this the last time. We have, by the way, recorded a podcast with the Pokemon expert. The problem is we ran into a little glitch on the video. So the video is of the annex's ceiling, because somehow we messed that up. And so it was kind of a first glance proof or proof of concept with Professor Pokemon that I think has got too much gold in it to leave it on the cutting room floor. So I think we're going to edit that one up and ship that one out soon too. So listen up for Professor Pokemon. And if you saw him on Instagram, TikTok got mad at us for posting we were hunting at Crooks, and he came running around from the corner holding up about as big a bottle of Jim Beam White as he could hold in honor of Mr. Label, holding it up and going, "Look, Dilly." And he held it up, and I think the caption was, "Boys got a lot to learn." And TikTok didn't care very much for that, and Instagram really didn't care. So if you want to see the picture of the Professor Pokemon holding up a bottle of Jim Beam White and laughing like hell at Mr. Label, it's there. So
I'll give him a little bit of credit, though. I'll give him a little bit of credit. We were walking around the liquor store, and I was actually looking for a bottle of Canadian whiskey for the guy that owns the building we're moving into. I was trying to find him a gift. I asked our general contractor, what does he drink? He's from Canada. He prefers this very specific Canadian whiskey, and I couldn't find it on the shelf. And we asked Professor Pokemon, hey, this is what we're looking for. It's called 40 Creek, I think is what it was. And we were like, hey, that's what we're looking for. If you see it on the shelf, let us know. Within 5 seconds, he had found that on the shelf. So the kid has it in his blood. It's there. He's meant to hunt. He's going to be great at it one day. We just got to wait about 15 years and he'll be right there with us.
Exactly. So we appreciate you listening. As we said before, like, comment, subscribe, and class dismissed. Till later.
Yeah, there it is.
Until next time, sip bourbon. Cheese. Well, I won't say that wasn't a complete shit show.